Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us this Sunday afternoon for Alaska weather. On the chart, the time, show time, still 5:30 p.m. for APB and KUAC on 9.4, 360 North 7:30, and Alaska Public Media 5 a.m. the following morning, and every evening on YouTube. Satellite imagery today shows nice conditions here for the southeast coast. You have this persistent band of clouds and rain up along the North Gulf Coast, kind of breaking up as you get inland and the precipitation becomes a little more mixed. And you can see as the wind flow crosses the mountains, you get a few holes in the clouds there and scattered areas of mixed precipitation extending all the way out to the central Arctic coast, and a break right through here from the northwest coast there all the way down into southern Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island. And then the very intense storm that brought the very strong winds, 60, 80 mile per hour winds here across the central Aleutians with the hurricane force storm warnings out for the marine areas, that pulling northeastward really close to Unalaska there, and they had gusts upwards of 80 to 90 miles per hour here across the Fox Islands earlier, gusts 70 to 80 miles per hour across the Alaska Peninsula in the channeled areas, and that low center tracking up just southeast of the Pribilofs there, and some pretty good winds along the coast as well with this front, anywhere from 40 to possibly as high as 65 miles an hour there right along the coastline. That was good for storm warnings all through this area. And again, the hurricane force wind warnings in the Marines, that shifted from the central areas into the eastern zones currently this afternoon, and winds back to the west diminishing as the colder air sweeps in behind the system. On the chart, areas of rain here across the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound into Cook Inlet here, and possibly the valleys with a mixture of conditions extending up along that trough axis. Again, rain, snow, combination of, and possibly even some isolated areas of freezing rain. But either side of that trough, fair conditions, mostly cloudy here from the upper Yukon Valley. A few breaks over the Copper River Basin. And it looks like some sunshine broke out over the Panhandle with this high sitting over Canada. Light wind conditions, though. All the winds associated with this storm here, and those winds becoming easterly on the increase now over the northern Bering Sea, Yukon Delta, and some pretty gusty winds up along the eastern Arctic coast, mostly along and off the coast in the marine area where there are gale warnings out. And for tonight, looks like some showers here get pretty close to the Panhandle, but will stay off the coast tonight. Otherwise, just look for variable clouds, light winds. No change here over the eastern interior. Also no change over south central Alaska and the North Gulf Coast. Periods of rain, nothing really heavy. And also for Cook Inlet, probably dry. Madanuska, Susitna Valley on down toward Eagle River, and possibly even into Anchorage here with just some scattered moisture there along the Alaska Range. Dry up across the Tanana Valley in the central interior. Back out to the Seward Peninsula, although windier here in the western areas. And a very weak low up there on the north slope. Just look for cloudy skies with a few scattered mixed precipitation type showers there along the Brooks Range. Could see a few flurries, maybe a little bit of fog, but nothing significant up along the central Arctic coast from about Barrow on down to maybe Point Lay. This system slowly moving northward, gradually weakening. Still storm warnings out along the southwest coast tonight. and the high wind warnings coming down for the central Aleutians and eventually here for the eastern Aleutians as that tight pressure field with a low center lifts a little farther to the north. These winds, even for the Alaska Peninsula back to the Fox Islands, will continue to diminish slowly, but quite windy conditions, strong westerlies, and snowfall levels falling pretty low out to the west, so look for some mixed rain and snow showers entering, but probably not getting much farther east than, say, Kiska Island. And then for tomorrow, low center about the same, lifts a little farther to the north, strong jet stream across the Pacific driving this front eastward, stretching it out and weakening it, but it should hold together enough to bring gale force winds into Kodiak Island tomorrow with rain, more showery, but really not much different from today here, Prince William Sound, especially western Prince William Sound, southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula drying out from about Valdez to Cordova. Another nice day here for the southeast coast, a risk of an isolated shower or two down there along the coast of, along Prince of Wales Island. Otherwise, partly sunny and continued light winds. A little bit more of a breeze here over the interior, but nothing too significant, and some light rain and snow showers possible up there in the north, mainly along the southern slopes of the western mountains there. Otherwise, a dry day for the most part over the interior, and this band of rain narrowing here. Nothing like it was, brought about 2 inches of rain to Unalaska along with those strong wind gusts today, and anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to an inch fell along the Alaska Peninsula. Not so much probably will move into Kodiak, as well as not so much winds as the whole system weakens as it slides off to the east, and with the main low center here hanging back to the west. And we can see on the edge of the chart there the next system pushing eastward, but it moves quite rapidly in a very strong jet stream across the Pacific, and by Tuesday afternoon it's all the way, tracks eastward here just south of the Aleutians, and is already sliding out of the picture Tuesday afternoon there. So more of the same. You'd be on the cold side of the jet here for the Aleutians and the Bering Sea, so lots of showers, gusty west winds, and pretty unsettled for the next several days. Another weak front develops and moves right to about this position. A lot less wind with it, but still chance of rain, occasional rain, not heavy rain here from the Alaska Peninsula, and mixing out rain or snow from about Nunivak Island, the Yukon Delta coast, and then pushing up towards St. Lawrence Island in the afternoon. Another weak low here. Now we have just south of the Kenai Peninsula, so rain pulls east to Kodiak, probably break out into some sunshine in the afternoon there, with a chance of rain or snow, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, back into the Alaska Range, possibly some of that slipping on into the central Kuskokwim Valley, but whatever does will be quite light. Partly to mostly sunny Copper River Basin, variable clouds really through all of the interior, and winds staying on the light side, and on up to the north, looking really good. A little breezy on the eastern Arctic coast, and maybe a few skips of snow catching Barrow, and that's about it as far as any snowfall goes. And then this front, again, driving eastward here, kind of slips northward, bringing rain to the southern southeast coast, edging northward throughout the day, probably into the southern areas. Probably won't reach Juneau, definitely won't reach Haines or Skagway. Chance of showers for Yakutat. Temperatures across the Panhandle today, mid-40s to as high as, mid-50s over at Stewart, Hyder there about 54. 52 at Sitka, 48 at Klawock. State Capital had 45 today with a 46 at Cordova. Valdez pushed up to 41, 36 at McCarthy, 38 there at Palmer, and north of the mountains, Tok, 26 degrees, 37 at Fairbanks, Tanana down to 30, and mid-20s for the Yukon Flats, Bettles, 33, 28 Anatuvik. Up along the Arctic coast, temperatures in the upper 20s to lower 30s there, and rising to the mid-30s here around Cape Lisburne, southward to the upper 30s to the Seward Peninsula, with 37 there at Nome. Otherwise, Gamble at 41, and over the interior here is a 32 over at Huslia, or not Huslia, but Marshall, 34 at McGrath, and then 40 at Bethel. On out to the southwest coast, we've got 44 there at Togiak. Actually, that was Cape Newnham. 45 King Salmon, and pretty strong southeast winds now developing here, gusting upwards of 60 miles an hour, like at Port Hayden there, with these temperatures in the mid-40s and lower 40s for the eastern Aleutians all the way out to the west. Lows for tonight, single numbers and teens here. Eastern Burke's Range, say Arctic Village, right down into the North Waytoke area, near 20 for the Copper River Basin, lower to mid-30s southeast coast, about the same for south central Alaska, 35 to 40 here for Bristol Bay, all the way up to St. Lawrence Island, 40s everywhere else, and then, well, not everywhere else, down into the upper 30s again here for the central and western Aleutians. And for the highs tomorrow, 20s or near 30 here for the Arctic coast, 35 to 40 up there in the northwest, upper 20s, lower 30s across the Tanana Valley, 20s to mid 30s Copper River Basin depending on your elevation and your longitude here, with mid 40s for the North Gulf Coast, Cook Inlet, upper 40s for Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, and 40s for the Panhandle. Flying weather tomorrow morning, could be some areas of IFR here in the inside waters there, obviously low stuff. Otherwise, VFR conditions, definitely for the eastern interior. IFR, south side of the Kenai Peninsula, or east and southeast side of the peninsula. Also along the western Alaska range on the eastern slopes there. IFR Kodiak Island, patch out here along the southwest coast. Otherwise, just showery with marginal VFR for the Bering Sea, becoming VFR farther to the west. And then we've got a more extensive IFR zone up there on the western and central Arctic coast, extending down to the north slope to a certain extent. That shifts eastward, and now just a narrow band there right along the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, pretty good VFR through a big portion of the interior. Marginal VFR along the southwest coast, out into the central Bering Sea. Marginal stuff for the Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula. VFR for the entire Panhandle. And also VFR, looks like from Nikolsky all the way out to the Komodorskis. And for passes, Anatuvik, marginal to start with, becoming VFR, while Adigan, kind of marginal throughout the day, off and on. Lake Clark and Merrill, occasionally marginal, especially on the eastern approaches. And for Rainy, VFR. Windy, VFR. Isabel, VFR. Mentasta, another VFR day. Tanita, VFR again. And for Portage, marginal VFR. For Chilcoot and White, VFR. And the freezing levels, again, we've got 4,000 feet here over the central interior, and also up along the eastern Arctic coast there, the upper level high center right up in that area. So wherever you have these freezing levels above the surface there, anywhere there's precipitation in there, probably possibility it could be mixed or maybe some isolated freezing rain, but there's no advisories out for that at all. Otherwise, we've got 2,000 to 4,000 feet here across the southeast coast, and about 2,000 feet for the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. Icing, kind of a widespread area of probably mixed icing, areas of, for the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, right up along the coast there, but not much inland, mostly out to the west. And a couple of bands here, the persistent moisture boundary we've seen here kind of holding steady there, but edging its way in toward the southeast coast. This zone here associated with the front pushing across Kodiak Island. And the jet stream showing again a strong jet across the Pacific. Splits here, but the split's a little farther to the east than it was, so that front's driving eastward. Then southeast 100 knots across the southwest interior. Big upper level high holding there over the northeast part of the state, and kind of in between there for the Panhandle. 9,000 feet, still pretty strong winds, 30 to up to 45 knots approaching the Kenai Peninsula. Easterlies, east-southeasterlies, 45 to 55 knots across the Yukon Delta, even up to 35 knots here, say as you get in toward roughly Tanana, but much lighter up to the north. Still pretty strong along the eastern Arctic coast there, 35 to 45 knots. The strongest winds really off to the north there, so that's just affecting the east side of the coastline up there. And at 3,000 feet, 40 to 55 knots, or 40 to 50 knots, right into the Kenai Peninsula across the Alaska Range, taking a more easterly direction there on the north side of the low center here, but 45 to 50 knot winds continuing along the southwest coast tomorrow, and 35 to 50 knotters sweeping in from the northwest down into the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And for turbulence, still could be some severe, especially for small aircraft, Nunivak Island, Yukon Delta coast there. With the strong southeast winds, otherwise moderate chop in the turquoise area, lighter conditions for the Pribilofs, moderate chop still in the forecast there for the Alaska Peninsula and most of the Aleutians, as well as the southern Kenai Peninsula into southern Cook Inlet, but smooth for the Arctic coast, except possibly here on the east side. Could be a little bumpy, but smooth conditions over the Copper River Basin on down across the Panhandle. And after today's break, I'll return with a look at the marine forecasts. Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. He is here and has been here many times to talk to us about weather satellites and how those can help Alaskans understand our weather, how we can do better detection, keep more people safe from things even like volcanic ash. But today, Eric, you're going to talk to us a little bit more about weather satellites and how that can keep Alaskans safe and protect our property from wildfire, right?
That's right, Dave. Today's topic is where there's smoke, there's fire. And thanks for having us back again to Alaska
Anytime.
Weather. Well, weather satellites have a lot of different instruments on them. It turns out that the electromagnetic spectrum has a lot going on in it, and only one part of that is visible light, what we see.
Right.
Weather satellites, of course, report that. Today's topic is wildfires.
Okay.
There are some people who say that in Alaska in the summertime you don't have severe weather. These people are usually from Oklahoma or somewhere, and F5 tornadoes tend not to occur in Alaska.
Right.
People have also said what we do have in the summer. What is Alaska's severe summer weather can be hydrology,
Right.
flash flood and erosion in the mountains and things like that, and fires, wildfires.
Absolutely.
Those were here in 2004, certainly remember that. We've got an example here from 2014. Now it was a quiet season overall, but in May, down on the Kenai Peninsula, we had a wildfire on the Funny River, and this is a satellite image from a polar orbiter that went right over Alaska, and we can see the plume of smoke coming out of that fire on the Kenai, curling down. It's caught in the wind. It goes down toward Kodiak Island, curves around. You can see it circulating around a low pressure system that's in the Gulf of Alaska.
It was a beautiful picture.
Oh my gosh.
Except there was a fire.
There's a fire there. The nice thing is with this satellite image, you can tell where the fire origin is, where the smoke is coming from. And it's a color image. We're looking at the wavelength spectrum of about 0.4 to 0.7 micrometers or microns. That's what the human eye would see. If you were riding on the satellite and looked down, you could see this kind of an image.
Right.
So that's pretty nice. But it turns out there's more to the electromagnetic spectrum than just visible light.
Okay.
You've heard of infrared, ultraviolet, that kind of thing. If we move into longer wavelengths, let's go to one specifically, 3.7 microns.
Okay, 3.7.
Why worry about that one?
Okay.
Well, we've got an example here. 3.7, it turns out, happens to be very sensitive to a certain temperature range, temperatures where fires burn.
Okay.
And so we've got an example zoomed in a little more from that same Funny River fire down on the Kenai Peninsula, and we can see that you get up into a few hundred degrees Fahrenheit, and that's where the colors are. We can see there on the Funny River fire to the west and to the east, almost a horseshoe shape there, is not only we're seeing where the fire is in a general sense, but specifically where's the active fire
That is where
front.
it's burning right now.
And it's
Amazing.
3.7 microns is the important temperature there.
Okay.
That's right.
So this is really important to firefighters on the ground, people that are making plans and directing the firefighters on where they need to go and cut the trenches and keep people safe.
You know it. If you want to fight that fire, you got to know where it is.
Okay.
You got to know the leading edge. We've also got a movie loop, nothing quite like animating it in time.
Yeah.
You can see the fire spreading out over time with a succession of film or succession of images. Now this is one channel, 3.7 micron. You know, we looked at that color smoke image before.
Right.
And that's actually a red, a green, and a blue. That's how you get color imagery. What if you took 3 different wavelengths in the infrared? You went from like 2.2 micron, 1.5 micron, up to 3.7. You mix them together, you get this other kind of color image, which is even a better way to sharply bring out the details of where that leading edge of the fire is.
Okay.
You'll note, though, in the infrared, guess what? We don't see the smoke. That's too bad. And on these movie loops, you can see the clouds go by. These channels can't see through clouds. The lesson is there's no one perfect solution. You got to have the visible, got to have some of that infrared single 3.7 channel, some of the infrared mixing to help get a different perspective. Another one, we've talked before about a fun channel called the day-night band.
Yes, one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, and in Alaska in the winter, it's great. We got all this darkness. The day-night band is so sensitive to seeing light. You can see features that otherwise aren't available. Now in Alaska, when you have a forest fire, it tends to be light out all the time. It's our summer. But we can go down south to the Rim Fire in California in 2013. Now, okay, it was in California, not Alaska, but Alaskan crews went down to fight that fire, so we
Fair
can talk
enough.
about it here on Alaska Weather. Here we have a 3.7 micron channel shot of the rim fire, again, kind of a horseshoe shape, showing that active fire front down there. And then we'll look again to the day-night band, the visible light, and then you can see how the fire is all bright. You can see the active fire front and actually the city lights over there too. Turns out that the cities, while they're active in a social sense, are not really hot in a fire sense. So they don't show up in the 3.7 micron. They're not hot like a fire is, but the fire in the cities look the same from a visible light perspective. And a fun thing here too is that we can see the smoke plume going north from the rim fire on the day-night band. So if we were ever to have, like in 2004 in Alaska, you get dark at night, we still had an active fire season that year.
Right,
That was, you know, that really bad year. The day-night band didn't exist then, but if we had fires now in August, we could use it then. The lesson here is weather satellites, they offer many different wavelengths of light. Some are used for different purposes, and some of these that we just looked at tonight are especially helpful here in Alaska to find and to track the behavior of these wildfires so the crews can go out there and do their jobs.
Sure, sure. So a satellite toolbox for the firefighting crews and the fire weather forecasters, and it just underlines how important satellites are, especially for Alaska and our mission for the National Weather Service to protect life and property, and also to enhance the national economy. So wonderful stuff there, Eric. And people can look at pictures like this anytime by going to gina.alaska.edu. You'll find images there all around Alaska at various times of the year, and not just about fire weather, but volcanic ash and smoke and anything else you want to check out. They're always beautiful pictures and always interesting to look at no matter what time of the day. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We appreciate it and welcome you back anytime. For this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. See you next time.
Today's sea ice analysis showing now this area along the east side there from the Central Coast, definitely north of the Barrier Islands now, thickening up a little, but the conditions here over the Beaufort Sea about comparable to what they were in 2012, and out here to the west about the same as it was in 2007. Just a little trivia. Southeast coast winds tomorrow, not too bad, 15 knots for Clarence Strait. Light northerlies here, Stevens Passage, Frederick Sound, on up into northern Lynn Canal. Southeast 20 for the south coast, small craft advisories for the north coast, all out of the southeast. And then we've got gales here coming into the picture. These increasing to 35 knots in the afternoon Tuesday there for the north coast, and southeast 30 knots for the south coast with seas 14 to 17 feet. And Prince William Sound, small craft advisories east of 25 tomorrow. Small crafts also up for the North Gulf Coast, as well as the Barrens, Kamishak Bay, Kodiak Island, and Shelikof Strait, while Cook Inlet is looking at northeasterlies at about 20 with 4 to 5 foot seas. And looking ahead to Tuesday, light variable winds here for Shelikof Strait, and southwest 25 early, diminishing down to 15 in the afternoon here along the east side of Kodiak Island. South to southeast 30 knots. The Barren Islands and the western zone here becoming east 35 knots there for the zone that Middleton Island sits in. Otherwise, another small craft advisory easterly 25 day for Prince William Sound, and we've got small craft advisories for Cook Inlet now for 25 knot winds. Gales for the Alaska Peninsula out of the southwest, so lighter winds than what you're seeing today, and southeast 30 for Bristol Bay, Sitkinak to Castle Cape down to 20 knots. And for Tuesday, small craft advisories now, west-southwest 25 to 30 for the peninsula, much lighter winds for Bristol Bay, and southwest 15 there, southwest to Sitkinak. West winds 40 knots for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, down under the storms and hurricane force warnings you had today. 40 to 45 knot winds extend all the way back, say, to Amchitka, and then you're down to 35 knots to Shemya. For Tuesday, west 30 knots there for just about the entire Aleutian chain here, with the lightest winds there between Atka and Nikolsky, but seas still running anywhere from 15 to 20 feet. And along the, or actually, that's the one that was missing. Anyway, for the southwest coast tomorrow, south 25 knots, southeast 30, gales again for St. Lawrence Island, wrapping back northeast at 30, the low center right in this area, west winds coming down to 30 knots for the Pribilost, with those seas hanging in there at 20 feet. And for the Arctic coast, southeast at 40 on the east side there, easterlies 20 to 25 knots on the east side and 25 knots on the west side here, and a pretty uniform wind pattern all the way down to the Bering Strait. Let's see, we've got southeast here. I guess that's Sunday, so how that snuck in there. Anyway, for tonight, a weak low up here over the eastern North Slope, and so gales again on the eastern side there. Otherwise, big storm here slowly moving northward there. Got storm warnings, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, all the way up along the southwest coast. Winds will begin to gradually diminish here over the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. The front pushing eastward spreads rain to Kodiak Island with gale force winds again tomorrow, with the front right along that position. Lighter winds, more showers back to the southwest, and still pretty windy though, with showers all the way back to Shemya, and quite strong winds here. Again, storm warnings along the southwest coast tomorrow. Fair conditions over the interior with not much of any in the way of precipitation. That includes the southeast coast. And for Tuesday, a front pushes eastward, kind of elongates through the southern and central panhandle, where there'll be the best chance of precipitation there. Drier to the north though. Another dry day across the interior, and chance of moisture here, south central Alaska. Mostly Cook Inlet, the Kenai Peninsula, but breaking out for Kodiak, a weak front with a little rain and snow here along the southwest coast. Say mostly rain from Nunivak Island on down along the Alaska Peninsula, but this front quite weak, so the winds not going to be too big a deal with that, and still pretty brisk out over the Aleutians, with a series of troughs pushing east-southeast across the area there for lots of showers, and most of cold air staying up to the northwest. Well, that's a look at Alaska weather for today. Thanks for...
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Thanks for your continued support of Alaska Public Media. I'm Kristen Hall, Director of Member Engagement. Without our members, there'd be no Frontline, Nature, Nova, or Arthur. It's your support that makes all the difference. On behalf of all of us here at Alaska Public Media, thanks to all of our members for choosing to invest in great programming.